Senior Germany correspondent for The Economist, who's also been covering the Hungarian election. Good to see you tonight, Vendeline. The Economist has a very interesting interactive tracker for this election, which takes us from the beginning of Peter Magyar's leadership in the Tisza party back in 2024. Tisza, or Respect and Freedom Party, starting. Let's take a look at this. Around 20% of the vote. Viktor Orban's Fidesz party around 40% of the vote. And then this crossover happens, doesn't it? At the end of that year, Tisza leading since. So tell us both, Vendeline, about both parties, the path in that time, and perhaps key moments and signs that Peter Magyar's party had really taken off.
So Tisza used to be a tiny party, right, until Peter Magyar took it over and led it to great prominence. He basically just burst onto the scene in the wake of a scandal of child abuse that was covered out by the government. And it's been upwards ever since, and Tisza has been consistently leading the polls ever since. But of course, the electoral system is heavily skewed in favor of Fidesz. So Tisza basically has to win by a fairly big margin in order to win, if you see what I mean. It's because Viktor Orban has reshaped the electoral system entirely to Fidesz's advantage with gerrymandering, first-past the post in single-member constituencies and so forth. So it's a free election, hopefully, that we are going to see, but not a fair election.
It's interesting you touch upon the kind of the political birth of Peter Magyar as a significant figure as a leader of the opposition in Tisza. It's probably worth also mentioning and just explaining to us the context of a real political drama that's easily missed, because going back to that, the child sex abuse scandal, his ex-wife, Judith Varga, was the justice minister, and they went through a divorce in the same year. And not only that he released secretly recorded conversations they had by phone, which helped launch his kind of anti-corruption mandate. But that in itself is actually, it takes a minute to think about and process, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Peter Magyar used to be a Fidesz insider. He was part of the Fidesz bubble because of his very prominent wife, but he was also at the time, according to those who knew him at the time, hoping for a big job at Fidesz, which he didn't get. And then, they had a very acrimonious split up, and he secretly recorded these conversations between his wife and others about the cover-up of a child abuse scandal. So it's a bumpy beginning, and Peter Magyar used to be very much of the Fidesz machine in many ways, and now he's trying to beat them at their own game. Because his policies, Tisza's policies, are not, in many ways, not that different from Fidesz. The only big difference is that they're far more pro-European and Western. So it's really now a choice between a very Western-oriented party that wants a good relationship with the EU and a very Russia-friendly party, Fidesz party, that is supported by Trump and by Putin. So these are very stark choices, in spite of some similarities.
Let's pick up on that point, because when we look at the similarities, let's talk about Viktor Orban, an idol of the globalist nationalist conservative right. One of your colleagues, Matt Steinglass, the Economist Europe editor, said this, a really striking quote. He said, Orban has invented a way of turning the country from a democracy into a competitive authoritarian system without using violence, but through legal mechanisms, spreading control through the economy, through the information system, through bureaucracy. So for any candidate, basically, Vendeline, to be successful in this environment, it takes a certain kind of person. And going back to what you said, perhaps that's why Peter Magyar's position as a former insider has helped him.
Absolutely. It's helped him. It has sharpened his political instincts. He is a fabulously gifted retail politician. So Matt Steinglass and I were together at electoral rallies of Tisza outside of Budapest at the end of March, and you could see him at work. I mean, he's sort of in some ways giving the same speech, but he's doing it with absolute energy and conviction, and he's greeted like a rock star. So he's charismatic, and he's very good also at social media and focusing really on the domestic policy issues. He stayed away from international politics. He stayed away from Ukraine. He just focused on what really ails Hungarians. And I think that has really made his political fortune. He had a very carefully crafted message.
It is very interesting. And he gave an interview last year, an English interview, where he talked about some of the good things of Fidesz party, in his view, that he would keep in place, including, he said, the southern border fence, the keeping illegal migrants out. So some of these areas, as you say, he's saying there won't be such a change. It's a benefit support as well for mothers and children as well. He said he might change some things, but he likes some of their policies. So that tells us it's not going to be an overarching difference, but there will be a key area, as you touched upon, with Europe. Now, we're going to hear from him in a moment, but I would first like your sense of the appeal of Viktor Orban and what's changed for him, because his appeal previously hasn't been to democracy, a liberal democracy, we know. It's been to the idea of a nation, campaigns dominated by anti-immigrant sentiment, a fear of Hungary being overrun, the need to remain one of the most ethnically uniform nations in Europe. And yet Orban has won overwhelmingly, hasn't he? Platform after platform, supermajority at times of the past 4 elections. Since 2022, Ukraine's been the electoral battleground as well, this peace over war rhetoric. But look at your tracker polls, it's not working this time. What is it?
It's not working for a number of reasons. One is the economy has been stagnating now since 2022. It's not going anywhere, and people, of course, feel that. People are more and more aware that they are missing the equivalent of about 2% of GDP that they could have received from the European Union, in cohesion and other funds, which have been blocked because of Viktor Orban's policies, because of his obstructionist foreign policy and his ignorant or his violations of the rule of law. And the third thing, of course, is corruption. People are so fed up with the very obvious, the very blatant corruption, the state capture. They feel so. One of the things Matt and I kept hearing in Hungary is now or never. They feel if we don't vote him out of office now, we are going to be, as one of the people you interviewed said, we are going to be Belarus. We have sort of crossed the line. We are not a democracy anymore. So people really feel. I think the voter turnout will be very high because Hungarians feel it's maybe the most important election in the post-war era for Hungarians.
You mentioned 2 things which are prescient right now. First of all, the money that matters. We're talking about, I think, a combined total of around 17 to 18 billion of EU funding that hasn't gone, has been frozen for Hungary over human rights, over rule of law issues. Let's have a listen to Peter Magyar. He gave the first thing he said he will do if elected. This is what he said a year ago to Deutsche Welle.
And the first step will be, for the next Hungarian Prime Minister, is to join the European Public Prosecutor's Office to stop the corruption and to fly to Brussels and to negotiate with the European Commissions, with all the institutions, and to defreeze the EU funds.
And it is worth saying, Vendeline, looking at the tracker as well and the differences, and yes, Tisza is ahead, there is still kind of an unknown voter. Is it, 20% or so? And we've seen Viktor Orban going outside of Hungary, going to neighbouring countries, those that still have the right to vote.
Absolutely. I think it's maybe more around 10%. I mean, it's hard to tell how many are exactly undecided. But Viktor Orban is very good at trying to attract Hungarian minorities in neighboring countries. He's been really encouraging them to vote, and they tend to vote Fidesz because they feel he's supporting them. And of course, the big question is whether the very massive sort of interference from America, the fact that they sent the vice president to boost Orban's chances, whether that has helped or whether that was counterproductive. It's not entirely clear to me how Hungarians feel about that, because they really don't like foreign powers interfering in their own country. And J.D. Vance is not Donald Trump. He's not as charismatic. He's not the big rock star. So that may have helped, but may have been even counterproductive.
And it is worth saying, because if you're watching a lot of the coverage, you might think, there's only 2 parties standing right now in Hungary. It is worth saying that, yes, they will get the majority of the vote. But is it worth, just to your view on the third party, which I think would get more votes, perhaps 5 to 7%, maybe, we don't know. But this is a far-right party. Is this a party that could potentially be a kingmaker? Because right at the start of this interview, you said, actually, depending on who wins, what changes you can make really depends on whether you get, 2/3 of the vote?
Exactly. So ideally, Peter Magyar would get a 2/3 majority in order to make changes very quickly to reverse the state capture under Viktor Orban. He really needs that 2/3 majority because he would need to change the constitution. If he gets that, his start will be not easy, but easier. This start in office or as prime minister. If not, and let alone if Orban somehow teams up with the far-right party, with the Homeland Party, it's a very different game. And the start of Tisza and Hopp. And I mean, there's still the possibility that Fidesz with the extremist party could form a government. I mean, that is not completely excluded because we simply don't know. Tisza seems to be firmly in the lead according to independent polls, according to our election tracker. But I think we have to see all that with a bit of caution. We just have to see what happens tomorrow.
Really good to hear your thoughts. And on the other side, we will know, and we'll look forward to your company as well and analysis. So joining our team, our panel for the World this week on Friday. A pleasure to talk to you, Vendeline von Bredow, Senior Germany Correspondent.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it too.
See you soon. See you on the other side for The Economist.